The Void Protocol Chapter 4, The Concrete. Darkness has a taste. Down here, beneath the ruins of the world, it tasted like pulverized concrete and ancient, stale copper. I woke up coughing. It wasn't a throat-clearing cough. It was a violent, spasmodic hacking that felt like I was trying to expel my own lungs. Every spasm sent a fresh wave of agony radiating from my fractured ribs, turning my chest into a cage of fire. I tried to inhale, but the air was thick, heavy, and wrong. It was filled with dust, particulate matter from the collapse of the Zenith Foundation. It coated my tongue, gritty and dry. I opened my eyes. Nothing changed. The blackness was absolute. It pressed against my open corneas with physical weight. For a terrifying second, I thought the EMP had fried my optic nerves along with my HUD. Vex, I croaked. The name scraped my throat raw. Light. Silence. No sarcastic retort. No digital chime. No tactical overlay illuminating the wireframe of my prison. The silence in my head was louder than the ringing in my ears. The neural interface was dead cold. The space where Vex used to be, that comforting low-level hum of data processing at the back of my skull, was now just a hollow void. It felt like a phantom limb. I could still feel the itch of the AI, but when I reached for it mentally, there was nothing but static. Right? I whispered, my voice trembling. Just me. Just me. I tried to sit up. My head hit stone immediately. I froze. I reached up with my one remaining hand, my flesh hand. My fingers brushed against rough, cold concrete inches from my nose. I reached to the left. Metal girders twisted like licorice. To the right. The cooling, smooth surface of the gilded stalker's leg. I wasn't just in the dark. I was buried. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. My breath hitched, becoming shallow and rapid. Hyperventilation. The enemy of the buried man. Calm down, I told myself. You're a rat, Kaelen. Rats survive in walls. You've been buried before. But never like this. Never under the weight of a fallen god. I needed to assess the damage. I did it the old-fashioned way, by feel. My legs were pinned but not crushed. The gilded stalker's chassis had formed a serendipitous arch over my lower body, shielding me from the main collapse of the ceiling. I wiggled my toes. Pain shot up my left shin, a fracture, likely hairline, but I could move them. My right shoulder. I didn't want to touch it. The stump was throbbing with a dull, wet heat. The cauterization from the thermal cutter held, but the impact of the fall had likely reopened some of the tissue. I could feel the sticky dampness of fresh blood soaking into my shirt. But the real problem wasn't the blood. It was the air. I reached for the rebreather mask clipped to my belt. My fingers traced the plastic casing. Crack. The faceplate was shattered. The filter cartridge was dented inward. I brought it to my face anyway, inhaling tentatively. It hissed. A pathetic, leaking wheeze. The scrubber was damaged. It was filtering out the large particulates, but the toxic gases, the carbon monoxide from the fires, the leaking coolant vapor, were seeping through. Warning, I whispered to myself, mimicking Vex's voice in a desperate attempt to stay sane. Oxygen reserves critical. Environmental toxicity rising. I had maybe an hour. 2 if I stopped moving. 10 minutes if I panicked. I needed light. I patted the floor around me, searching for the flare I had dropped. My hand brushed against something small and hard. The dead switch. The rusted iron lever Elara had used to sever the connection. It had snapped off during the collapse. I kept searching. Gravel. Blast. Bone shards. My fingers touched a cylindrical tube. The flare. I grabbed it. It felt light. Empty? I shook it. A faint rattle. Please, I begged the darkness. I struck the cap against the concrete slab above me. Sputter. A weak, red glow sputtered to life. It wasn't the blinding crimson of before. It was a dying ember casting long, wavering shadows that barely pushed back the dark. But it was enough. I saw my prison. It was a pocket of air no bigger than a coffin, carved out of the rubble by the bulk of the gilded stalker. The golden monster lay face down, its head crushed under a massive slab of fallen ceiling. The gold plating on its back was dull, covered in gray dust. And sitting on the throne just a few feet away was Omega. The skeleton of the founder had survived the collapse, protected by the heavy iron frame of the master terminal. He was still grinning. The red light of the flare reflected in his empty eye sockets, making him look like he was watching me with amusement. You think this is funny? I rasped at the corpse. I saved the world and my reward is a concrete box. The skeleton didn't answer, but the red light revealed something else. Behind the throne, where the wall of the cavern used to be, there was a breach. The seismic shockwave caused by the dead switch hadn't just brought down the ceiling. It had cracked the foundation of the server room. A jagged fissure barely wide enough for a man split the rock wall. And from that fissure a draft was blowing. It was faint. It smelled of rot and stagnant water. But it was moving air. Air, I breathed. A way out. I tried to pull my legs free from under the stalker. I grunted, straining against the weight. The gold statue shifted a millimeter. Dust rained down on my face. Move, I growled. You dead, expensive paperweight. Move. I pushed with my good hand against the stalker's hip. I dug my heels into the gravel. I screamed, channeling every ounce of pain into kinetic energy. The stalker slid. Just enough. I yanked my legs free. I lay there panting, staring at the fissure. It was 5 meters away. 5 meters of jagged metal, broken glass, and unstable rubble. I started to crawl. One-armed. One leg dragging. I was a broken insect scuttling across the floor of a tomb. I reached the fissure. I shoved the dying flare into the crack to see what was inside. It wasn't a tunnel. It was a service crawl space. The walls were lined with rusted pipes and ancient cabling. It sloped upward, disappearing into the dark. But lying in the mouth of the crawl space was an obstacle. A body. It wasn't a skeleton. It was fresh. It was a man, wearing the tattered remains of a Zenith maintenance uniform. He was lying on his stomach, crawling toward the cavern, as if he had been trying to get in when the collapse happened. Hey, I whispered. Hey, you okay? I reached out and touched his shoulder. He felt squishy. The body rolled over. I recoiled, slamming my head against the rock. The man didn't have a face. Where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was only smooth, pale skin. Like a mannequin. Or an unformed fetus. But in the center of that blank face, a single symbol was branded into the flesh. A perfect, black circle. The null mark. What the hell? I whispered, nausea rising in my throat. The body twitched. It wasn't dead. The faceless head turned toward me. The chest heaved, taking in a rattling breath through skin pores that shouldn't exist. It raised a hand where the fingers had fused together into a fleshy paddle. It reached for my flare. It wanted the light. Warm? The word didn't come from a mouth. It came from the vibration of its chest cavity. A low, wet resonance. This was a sleepwalker. One of the victims harvested by Zenith. But when the connection was severed, when Elara broke the link, his mind didn't come back. The download was interrupted. He was a glitched file. A hollow shell with corrupted data trying to run a human operating system. I scrambled backward, fumbling for my knife, but I didn't have a knife. I didn't have my gun. I grabbed a shard of broken glass from the floor. A piece of a shattered vacuum tube. It was sharp, jagged, and about 6 inches long. Don't touch me, I warned, my voice shaking. The hollow thing lunged. It moved with a terrifying jerky speed, flinging itself at me like a spider. Its fused hand slapped the flare out of my grip. The light spun away, rolling into a corner. Darkness rushed back in. I felt its weight hit me. It smelled of ozone and sour milk. Its faceless head slammed into my chest, knocking the wind out of me. Cold, wet hands grappled for my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. I stabbed blindly with the glass shard. Squelch. I hit something soft. Warm liquid sprayed over my hand. Not blood. It felt oily. The thing shrieked. A sound like dial-up internet static screamed through a megaphone. It thrashed, its weight crushing my fractured ribs. I saw stars. I was going to black out. Die. I roared, stabbing again. And again. And again. I hammered the glass shard into the creature's torso until it stopped moving. Until the static scream faded into a wet gurgle. I shoved the dead weight off me. I rolled away, gasping, wiping the oily fluid from my face. I crawled to the flare. It was flickering, about to die. I held it up. The hollow thing lay still. Its blank face was ruined. I stared at it, chest heaving. This is what was waiting for me in the ruins. Thousands of them. The people I saved. I hadn't saved them. I had lobotomized them. I had turned the population of Neo-Viridia into monsters. I'm sorry, I whispered to the corpse. I'm so sorry. The flare sputtered and died. Total darkness returned. But in the silence I heard it. Drip, drip, drip. Water. Not coolant. Not oil. Water. And with it a faint draft of air. Cleaner air. I turned toward the crawl space. The hollow thing had come from up there. That meant there was a path. I clipped the dead flare to my belt. A habit. Never leave trash. I started to crawl into the fissure, climbing over the body of the man I had just killed. I didn't have Vex to guide me. I didn't have Elara to protect me. I was blind, broken, and guilty. But I was climbing. And for a rat from Sector 44, climbing was the only direction that mattered. The crawlspace wasn't designed for humans. It was a throat meant for cables and sewage. I dragged myself forward inch by agonizing inch. The floor of the tunnel was a slurry of mud, rust, and the oily black runoff from the void leak. Every time I pulled myself forward with my one good arm, my chest scraped against the rough concrete, sending fresh spikes of pain through my fractured ribs. But I kept moving, because behind me in the dark I could hear them. Slop, slop, slop. Wet hands hitting stone. The hollows. They were following the smell of my blood. They were blind, brain-dead, and glitching, but they had the persistence of a corrupted program trying to execute a command loop. Move, I whispered to myself. Just move, you piece of meat. The air in the tunnel was getting cooler. The smell of ozone and rot was fading, replaced by the damp, earthy scent of subterranean water. I reached a junction. The tunnel widened slightly, opening into a vertical shaft. Rusted iron rungs were stapled into the wall, leading up into the gloom. Water rained down from above. Not the acid rain of the city, but groundwater. Filtration runoff. I tilted my head back, opening my mouth. The drops hit my tongue. It tasted of limestone and iron. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. I drank greedily, letting the water wash the taste of the hollow's oily blood from my lips. I grabbed the first rung. It held. I started to climb. One-armed climbing is a rhythm of desperation. Reach, grip, pull, lock legs, breathe, repeat. My right shoulder, the stump, throbbed in time with my heartbeat. It felt heavy, as if the ghost of my cybernetic arm was still there, a phantom weight dragging me down. I missed Vex. I missed the tactical overlay that would have highlighted the rusted rungs, calculated the stress load, told me how many meters to the surface. Without the AI, the darkness felt thicker. It felt like it was inside my head. I climbed for what felt like hours. My muscles burned. My vision grayed out at the edges. Finally, my hand hit something solid. A hatch. I pushed. It didn't budge. Locked from the outside. Or buried. No, I wheezed. No, no, no. I hammered on the metal with my fist. Open. Damn you. The sound rang hollowly in the shaft. Below me, the slap, slap, slap of the hollows climbing the ladder got louder. They were fast climbers. They didn't feel fatigue. I pressed my ear against the hatch. Silence. Then, static. Not from the hatch. From my belt. The communicator. I fumbled for it, nearly dropping it down the shaft. I brought the brick-sized radio to my face. The power light was blinking red. Low battery. Anyone, sector, north. The voice. The woman. She was still broadcasting. I keyed the mic. I'm here. I'm under the hatch. Sector. I don't know the sector. I'm under the Spire Foundation. Static. Then, signal weak, triangulation. Barely. Who is this? Kaelen. I told you. The guy who pulled the plug. Kaelen? You sounded closer. I'm at a hatch. Circular. Embossed with. I shone the dying flare at the metal. A serpent eating its tail. The Omega symbol. There was a pause on the other end. A long, heavy silence filled with the crackle of atmospheric interference. Omega Access Port 4, the woman said. Her voice was sharp, professional. That's Deep Scraper. You're in the old drainage overflow. It's locked, I shouted, looking down. I could see the pale, faceless head of the first hollow emerging from the gloom below. And I've got company. Open it. I can't open it. It's manual. But I can tell you how to blow it. Blow it? I don't have explosives. I lost my kit. You have the radio, she said. That model? It's a military surplus brick. It has a lithium-ion core. If you short the battery contacts, it becomes a grenade. I stared at the radio in my hand. It was my only link to the world. My only voice in the dark. If I blow this, I said, I lose you. If you don't blow it, she replied, you lose your life. Do the math. The hollow below me let out a static shriek. It lunged, its fused hand swiping at my boot. I kicked it in the face. It fell, knocking the ones behind it off the ladder. A tumble of wet limbs and silent screams. But more were coming. Okay, I said, my voice trembling. Okay. How do I do it? Pull the back plate. Twist the red and black wires together. You have 5 seconds. Jam it into the hinge and duck. Wait, I said. Who are you? Rin, she said. Now do it. I ripped the back plate off the radio. I found the wires. My fingers were clumsy, numb from the cold. I twisted them. Sparks flew. The battery pack began to hiss and swell instantly. I jammed the radio into the gap between the hatch hinges. Fire in the hole. I screamed, shielding my head with my arm. Boom. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. The shockwave slammed me against the ladder, nearly knocking me loose. Heat washed over my neck. The hatch groaned. The hinges shattered. The heavy iron plate fell away, clattering into the darkness above. Light poured in. Gray, dusty, beautiful light. I scrambled up through the opening, coughing in the smoke. I rolled onto a concrete floor, gasping for air. I kicked the loose hatch cover back over the hole, dragging a heavy piece of rubble on top of it to seal it. From below, I heard the muffled thuds of the hollows hitting the closed door. They scratched at it for a moment, then went silent. I lay on my back, staring up. I wasn't outside. Not yet. I was in a subway station. But it wasn't like the black market station I had left hours ago. This was an ancient station, abandoned for decades. The walls were tiled in cracked white ceramic. The advertisements rotting on the walls were for products that hadn't existed for 50 years. But there was light. It filtered down from the surface through collapsed ventilation grates in the ceiling. Shafts of gray illumination cut through the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat up, wincing as my ribs protested. I looked at my belt. The radio was gone. Blown to pieces. Rin, I whispered. I was alone again. No Vex. No Elara. No Rin. But I was alive. And I was climbing. I looked around the station. It was littered with debris. But amidst the trash, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Shapes. Not hollows. Not statues. People. They were sitting on the benches. Leaning against the pillars. Lying on the platform edge. Dozens of them. They were dead. But there was no blood. No signs of struggle. No wounds. I dragged myself over to the nearest body, a woman in a business suit. She was sitting upright, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. I waved my hand in front of her face. No reaction. I checked for a pulse. Nothing. Her skin was cold but not rigorous. I touched her forehead. And then I felt it. A vibration. Her skull was vibrating. A low hum that I could feel in my fingertips. I pulled my hand back as if burned. Vex, I muttered instinctively. Scan 4. I stopped. No Vex. I looked at the other bodies. I moved from one to another. An old man. A teenager. A stray dog. They were all the same. Dead but vibrating. And they were all facing the same direction. Toward the Zenith Spire. They didn't die, I realized, the horror settling deep in my gut. They were paused. When Elara broke the connection, when the upload was interrupted, the people who were plugged in became hollows. But what about the people who weren't plugged in? What about the people who were just living under the shadow of the tower? The null wave from the dead switch hadn't just fried electronics. It had hit the biological hard drives too. It had put the city in safe mode. I walked, limped, toward the exit of the station. The escalators were frozen, clogged with more silent, vibrating bodies. I climbed over them, trying not to look at their open, empty eyes. I reached the surface-level turnstiles. I pushed through. I stepped out onto the street, and I saw the world I had saved. Sector 0. The heart of Neo-Viridia. It was a graveyard. The skyscrapers were dark monoliths against a sky that was no longer brown with smog. The sky was clear. For the first time in history, the smog was gone. The atmosphere had been scrubbed clean by the massive energy displacement of the void event. But it wasn't a blue sky. It was an aurora. Waves of color, sickly greens, bruised purples, and veins of electric red, rippled across the heavens. It looked like oil on water, but on a planetary scale. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And hanging in the sky, right above the ruins of the Zenith Spire, was the afterimage. The bone tower was gone. But it had left a scar. A tear in the fabric of the sky, a vertical slit of absolute darkness that refused to close. It looked like a pupil. A slit pupil in a rainbow eye. I stood in the middle of the empty street. Cars were stopped where they were, their drivers slumped over the wheels. The silence was absolute. No sirens. No wind. No hum of electricity. Just the hum of a million vibrating bodies. I started to laugh. It was a broken, jagged sound that hurt my throat. I did it, I told the silent city. I turned it off and on again. And now nobody's home. Click. The sound of a weapon cocking behind me. I froze. Turn around, a voice said. Slowly. Hands where I can see them. It wasn't a digital voice. It wasn't a hollow growl. It was human. Female. Tired. I turned slowly, raising my one hand. Standing 10 meters away, aiming a heavy-duty kinetic rifle at my chest, was a woman. She was wearing a patchwork of scavenged armor, riot gear painted matte black, draped with camouflage netting. She wore a gas mask, but it was pulled down around her neck, revealing a face smeared with grease and exhaustion. Her eyes were sharp, gray, and suspicious. On her belt, clipped next to a combat knife, was a radio. The twin of the one I had just blown up. "Rin?" I asked. She didn't lower the rifle. She looked at my missing arm. She looked at the blood on my shirt. She looked at the dead flare on my belt. "You're the scraper," she said. "Kaelen." "In the flesh," I said. "Mostly." She lowered the gun slightly but kept her finger on the trigger guard. "You said you pulled the plug," she said. "You said you stopped it." "I did." She laughed. It was a bitter, sharp sound. She pointed up at the sky, at the slit pupil in the aurora. "Look up, scraper," she said. "You didn't stop it. You just paused the download." She walked closer, her boots crunching on the glass-littered pavement. "And now," she whispered, looking at the silent, vibrating bodies in the cars around us. "Now we're stuck in the buffer." "Who are you?" I asked. "How are you awake? Why aren't you vibrating?" "I'm analog," she said, tapping her temple. "No Neuralink. No implants. Pure organic." The wave passed right through me. She looked at me with a new kind of intensity. "But you?" She pointed the gun barrel at my chest. "You have a Neuralink. I can see the port behind your ear. Why aren't you a vegetable like the rest of them?" I touched the port. It was cold. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe because I was at the epicenter. Or maybe—" I looked at my hand. The flesh hand. The one that had touched Elara. "Maybe I'm not the user anymore," I said. "Maybe I'm the admin." Rin stared at me for a long moment. Then she slung her rifle over her shoulder. "Admin, huh?" she spat. "Well, admin, unless you know the password to reboot 6 million people, you're just another ghost. Come on." "Where?" "My bunker. Before night falls." "What happens at night?" Rin looked up at the slit in the sky. "The eye opens," she said. "And the things that fell out of the tower, they start hunting." She turned and started walking down the silent street. I looked at the sky one last time. The scar seemed to pulse. I limped after her. The ascension was over. Now the survival began. The city wasn't dead. It was buffering. That was the only word for it. As I limped after Rin through the shattered streets of Sector 0, I realized the global degauss hadn't just fried the electronics. It had suspended the kinetic energy of the biological population. We walked past a looting in progress. 3 men were frozen in the act of smashing a jewelry store window. One had a crowbar raised above his head. His face was twisted in a snarl of greed, his muscles tensed for the strike. But he wasn't moving. He was vibrating. The sound came from his teeth, chattering at a frequency so high it sounded like a mosquito's wing beat. "Don't touch them," Rin warned, not looking back. Her grip on the kinetic rifle was tight, her eyes scanning the rooftops. "If you touch them, you ground the charge. They pop. Pop." I asked, clutching my stump. The pain in my shoulder was a dull, rhythmic throb now, synchronized with the humming of the city. "Liquidate," Rin said. "Like a bag of soup hitting the pavement. Whatever signal is holding them together, it's fragile." I stepped carefully around the looter. I looked into his eyes. The pupils were dilating and contracting rapidly, like a camera lens trying to focus on a subject that kept moving. He wasn't seeing the street. He was seeing the download. The sun was setting. In the old world, sunset was a brown smudge fading into black. In this new world, under the influence of the void scar, sunset was a psychedelic trauma. The slit in the sky, the tear where the bone tower had been, began to open. It didn't just get wider, it got deeper. The darkness inside the slit wasn't empty space. It was a dense, purple nebula that swirled with intelligent patterns. And as the light faded, the aurora intensified. Green and violet ribbons of light danced across the skyscrapers, reflecting off the glass towers. It made the city look like it was underwater. "Pick up the pace, scraper," Rin said, checking the mechanical watch on her wrist. "We have 10 minutes before the blink." The blink? The eye opens fully at 2000 hours. When it does, anything caught in the open gets scanned. If you have a pulse, you get deleted. Deleted? You mean killed? I mean deleted. Removed from the substrate. Gone. No body. No ash. Just Control X. We turned a corner into an alleyway jammed with frozen traffic. A taxi had crashed into a delivery truck. The driver was slumped over the wheel, vibrating against the airbag. My bunker is 2 blocks down. Rin pointed to a nondescript steel door welded into the foundation of a collapsed parking garage. It's shielded. Lead-lined concrete. Analog locks. Screech. A sound tore through the air above us. It sounded like a modem connecting, amplified to 100 decibels. It was a digital shriek that made my teeth ache. I looked up. Perched on the edge of a rooftop, silhouetted against the purple aurora, was a shape. It looked like a dog, but it was wrong. Its proportions were glitched. Its legs were too long, its torso too short. And it wasn't made of flesh. It appeared to be made of polygon shards. Like a low-resolution video game model that had escaped into reality. It flickered. 1 second it was there, the next it was 5 feet to the left. Fragmenter, Rin hissed, dropping to one knee and raising her rifle. Don't look at it directly. It messes with your depth perception. The creature, the fragmenter, let out a burst of static. It had no eyes, just a jagged, glowing white polygon where a face should be. It sees my Neuralink, I realized, feeling a cold spike of fear in the port behind my ear. It smells the admin privileges. It smells meat, Rin corrected. Move. To the door. I'll cover you. The creature leaped. It didn't jump in an arc. It teleported mid-air. It glitched forward in a series of jagged frames. Flash. 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 It landed on the hood of the taxi 10 meters away. Its polygon claws gouged deep furrows into the metal. Bow. 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 Rin fired. The kinetic rifle wasn't subtle. It fired heavy, depleted uranium slugs. The first shot missed, sparking off the pavement. The creature had glitched to the side. The second shot hit the taxi, shattering the windshield. The creature shrieked and lunged at Rin. Go, she screamed. I ran. Or rather, I hobbled as fast as my one good leg and my exhaustion would allow. I scrambled over the hood of the taxi, sliding on the broken glass. The creature swiped at Rin. She rolled, dodging the claw that dissolved the concrete where she had been standing. The pavement didn't crack. It just vanished into pixels. I reached the steel door. There was no keypad. No scanner. Just a heavy iron wheel like a submarine hatch. I grabbed it with my left hand. I pulled. Lock. Rin. It's sealed. Rin fired again. This time she anticipated the glitch. She aimed not at where the creature was, but where it was going to be. Splat. The slug hit the fragmenter mid-jump. The creature exploded, not into blood, but into a shower of white pixels and static noise that faded before it hit the ground. Rin sprinted toward me. Turn it clockwise. 3 rotations. I gritted my teeth and hauled on the wheel. Rust flaked off under my grip. Creak. 1 rotation. Behind Rin, 2 more fragmenters dropped from the rooftops. They moved like spiders made of broken glass. Creak. 2 rotations. Get inside. Rin shouted, throwing her shoulder against the door to help me. Creak clunk. The latch disengaged. We shoved the door open and fell inside. Rin spun around, grabbing the internal handle. She slammed the heavy steel door shut just as a polygon claw slashed through the air where her face had been a second ago. She spun the locking wheel from the inside. The deadbolts slammed home with a reassuring heavy thud. 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 Scratch. The creatures were outside, clawing at the steel. But the metal held. We were in darkness. Clear, Rin panted, leaning her forehead against the cool metal of the door. We're clear. She clicked a switch on her belt. A string of battery-powered Christmas lights, cheap yellow LEDs, flickered to life, strung along the ceiling of the bunker. I looked around. It wasn't a military bunker. It was a basement. A survivalist's wet dream. The walls were lined with shelves stacked with canned food, bottled water, and ammunition crates. In the corner, a diesel generator hummed softly, vibrating on rubber mats. There was a cot, a workbench covered in gun parts, and a massive wall-sized map of Neo-Viridia covered in handwritten notes and red string. It was messy. It was cramped. It smelled of gun oil and unwashed clothes. It was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. I slid down the wall, my legs finally giving out. I hit the concrete floor and just sat there, clutching my stump. Water, I croaked. Rin walked over to a shelf, grabbed a plastic bottle and tossed it to me. I fumbled with the cap, using my teeth to unscrew it since I only had one hand. I drank half the bottle in one breath. Rin sat down on a crate opposite me. She took off her gas mask, revealing her full face for the first time. She was young, maybe mid-20s, but her eyes were old. She had a scar running from her lip to her chin. Her hair was chopped short, utilitarian. She looked like someone who had decided a long time ago that survival was more important than comfort. "So," she said, cleaning her rifle with a rag. "You're the admin." "I don't know what I am," I said, wiping my mouth. "I used to be a scraper. I scavenged tech for the syndicate. And now I'm just the guy who broke the world." Rin snorted. "The world was broken long before you pulled that lever, scraper. You just changed the channel." She pointed to the port behind my ear. "Does it still work?" she asked. "The Neuralink?" "I don't know. My AI. Vex, he's gone. The EMP fried him." "Good," Rin said brutally. "Less noise. But the hardware, the port, it's still connected to your brainstem, right?" "Yeah." "Check it," she ordered. "What?" "Close your eyes. Check the feed. The EMP killed the local networks, but that thing in the sky, the afterimage, it's broadcasting. I can feel it in my teeth. If you're really the admin, you should be able to see it." I hesitated. I didn't want to look. I was afraid that if I opened that door again, I would see the Bone City. But I had to know. I closed my eyes. I reached out with my mind, feeling for the familiar phantom limb of the data stream. At first there was nothing. Just the dark silence of my own skull. And then, a spark. Not a HUD. Not a tactical overlay. A map. It unfolded in my mind's eye like a blooming flower. It was a wireframe 3D map of the entire city. But it wasn't made of lines. It was made of light. I saw the bunker we were in. A tiny blue dot. I saw the street outside. Red dots, the fragmenters, prowling. I saw the millions of gray dots, the sleepwalkers, frozen in the buffer. And in the center of the map, where the Zenith Spire used to be, there was a pulsing golden beacon. A signal. "I see it," I whispered, my eyes snapping open. "What do you see?" Rin asked, leaning forward. "A map," I said. "The whole city. And a destination." "Where?" "The Spire ruins. The Foundation." "Why?" "Because there's a timer," I said, the realization chilling my blood. I hadn't seen it with my eyes, but the knowledge had been downloaded into me the moment I connected. "System purge in 72 hours. "A timer for what?" Rin asked. "The buffer," I said. "It's temporary. The system. Omega system. It can't hold 6 million minds in suspension forever. The energy drain is too high. And when the timer runs out, the buffer collapses," I said. "The pause ends. And everyone who is vibrating, everyone who is currently stuck between here and the void, they don't wake up." Rin went pale. "They die." "No," I said. "Worse. They finish the download. They go to the Bone City. Permanently." I looked at my single hand. The hand that had touched Elara. "We have 3 days," I said. 3 days to get back to the Foundation. 3 days to find a way to reboot the system properly. Or humanity becomes just another file in the archive." Rin stared at me. Then she stood up and walked to the wall map. She ripped a piece of red string off a tack. "The Spire ruins are ground zero," she said. "The radiation levels, void radiation, will be lethal. The fragmenters will be swarming. And the gilded stalkers, the ones that survived, they'll be guarding the entrance." She turned to me. She didn't look scared. She looked angry. "We're going to need bigger guns," she said. "I can help with that," I said, looking at her workbench full of scavenged parts. "I can't shoot anymore. But I can build." Rin threw a heavy wrench at me. I caught it with my left hand. "Get to work, admin," she said. "If we're going to save the world, you need a new arm." I looked at the wrench. Then at the pile of scrap metal in the corner. For the first time since I woke up in the tomb, I felt something other than fear. I felt purpose.